Sorry, I know this doesn't make for a very good camera, but I have to move this. And I think it just did. So, I believe she's ready to dry and think about what all we talked about. Now, because of the wax I put around here in the checkering and around outside, when this dries, I can just flick it off of there. What little bit might remain, when I rechecker this, I'll cut through the glue, and it'll be, in my opinion, it'll be invisible. In my opinion, time will tell. This is a 12-hour set epoxy, and so tomorrow morning I'll come up here and we'll pull all this clamps and blocks and stuff off and give it a look-see. More later. I'm kind of getting underneath the edge of that glue and just lifting it. It's the wax I put on there is working. It's doing its job, which is to allow that epoxy to not stick. Yeah, that's working well. I'm not really cutting it off, I'm kind of lifting it off. And what I don't get out with this will clean up when I recheck all this. But I'm very happy with that. That's about as smooth and slick as I could have ever hoped for with a repair like that with pins in it. Trying to get those pins lined up to where that comes out that smooth. I won't say it's a crapshoot. I mean, you use all the skill you can, but it is still not an easy thing to do. When I get done with the refinishing and am able to sand and straight block this joint, of course I've got to clean all this stuff out of the inside down in here too. But see, I waxed that as well. I just lift it off of there. That's as smooth as a baby's butt right in there. That break, you can't tell that break. I'm gonna have to get a different shaped tool to get down inside there. I've got to get some sort of probably a carving chisel. And then I've got to get this metal mechanism out of that. That's the next thing. I got to get this metal out of there. And that slides in. This is a block of aluminum that I use to tap so I don't damage things. There we go. Woohoo! That came out easier than I had dreamed of. So this joint, this surface along the insides of where that metal was, the metal kept it even. As it was being pushed together, the metal wouldn't let them go side to side. I am very, very happy with that. Now I've got to strip this. So the finish is still on this piece. Before I go any further, I have to check one thing. I got to slip this back in. There's a retainer that holds this to the wood, and it's this little piece right here. The milling for that little piece is right in here. This little slot goes in there, and that piece of half moon shaped metal here goes in that slot. And I've got to make sure that there's no epoxy, that everything fits as it's supposed to. So I got to slip this in, shove it up in place. It fits really nicely around in here, very nicely. Now this piece of this little retainer clip goes like that, and that pushes down and lines up, and everything drops into a slot. But this pulls this wood back. There's a bevel, and as that goes down, it forces that wood back, so it's trapped between this clip and all this metal right here. No, that's not the appropriate size screwdriver. But it got me started. Now when I tighten that up, all this should be, this wood is just a few thousandths proud of the metal, which is typical. The mechanism works. I'm very satisfied with that. This is very important that this be a smooth transition, because the barrel lays right there, and that barrel is going to hug that, or this is going to hug the barrel. Yep, I'm good with that. Now I need to get on with the refinishing process. And get that out. Okay, thing, come out of there. Oh, they put a little slot in the back of this. Right back here in the very back is a little groove that they put in there. It allows you to pull that up. Browning doesn't miss anything. Very good. I have decided to sand off this finish instead of strip it chemically. Supposedly, chemical stripping will take off epoxy finishes, and the glue that I put in here is epoxy, and I don't want to take even the slightest chance of loosening that glue. I can sand this little bit of finish off in a few minutes. That's where that break is. Give me about 5 minutes alone with this and I'll show you where it used to be. That's where it used to be. You can see in the checking there's a line where the glue came up, but this is where the crack used to be in the wood. It's going to finish out nicely. I have to make sure that all the remnants of wax is gone, because when I start finishing on this, if there's any wax left in that check ring or even on the inside, it can cause you problems. Wax is good for what it's good for, but it's not good for everything. Now that I've got it sanded down to 320 and I've wet it again with this lacquer thinner, it'll raise that grain a little bit. I'll have to wait till that dries, and then I'll go back over it with 320 again, and then I can stain it. I may have to get a wire brush and get that out of the check ring there. It's kind of stubborn. It's stuck in there. Alright, I stained this thing yesterday. I've given it all night to dry the stain. The stain doesn't absolutely have to be dry, but it works better if it is. And another thing it does better if it is your finish will re-wet the stain and make it it'll turn your brush dark. It'll wet it and it'll come off into your brush and eventually go off into your can and everything else. It's just better. Overall drying time is about the same whether you let your stain dry or not, because if you put your finish on with the stain wet, then it just takes longer for your first coat of your finish to dry. See, finish dries from the inside out. That's just what it does. And that's the reason your first coat takes a lot longer to dry than subsequent coats, because once that first coat is dry, your next coat simply bond to it, hopefully chemically, and not just a physical bond where it just sits on top of it. But it doesn't take near as long for those next subsequent coats to dry. So that's that. You probably weren't holding your breath wondering about that, but when you work by yourself and there's no one else to talk to, you end up passing on that little tidbits. I finish on the insides of my stocks very carefully, because I never know if somebody's going to be caught out in the rain or something like that. I'm pretty meticulous about finishing the insides. I don't do this with every coat. I just do it with the first coat or two.